Truth Talks. Please, I'm excited about the Truth Talks. They are addressing true fellowship and what it means, what true fellowship and corporate worship looks like according to the Bible.
All right, let's get into the text. Where we at? Somebody said 9-7, 9-1. You sure we ain't in 8? All right. So, so for reference, we have pretty much covered Chronicles, let's say 1 up to about 8 right now. We're not going to dig into Chronicles, but remember this lesson started out to teach what? Kings and Chronicles. To see them both together and understand they were written in two different time periods. One was written prior to the fall. Prior to Babylon's invasion. The other one was written what? After. So you have two different groups of people who are experienced on the telling this story, either through previous experience, historical evidence, things that they have been told in the Chronicles, and you have people who were there in the Kings. But the stories line up like they should. And we see that if you go into Chronicles 8, we see in the beginning of it, this is where David has come to the end of building the temple. It's been 20 years and it's done. The prayers have been said. And now we're going to start seeing Solomon do some other things with the city of Jerusalem. All right. We're getting ready to see Solomon start pretty much the things that he's doing in his reign. He was doing the things before because during his reign, his job was to do what? Solomon had one job, build a temple. Anybody in this class, I like saying class because it makes it feel like a learning environment. Anybody in this class could think that Solomon did not do that job. Did he do it well? Did he miss a beat? In fact, he did it so well that this is what? In the scriptures, this is the best temple ever created. All right? We get confirmation of that where? In another book. Can't say he sleep today. He said he answered no questions. Anybody else know where they talk about the temple? It's the M&Ms. They get into them. According to one Rice was he? But do you know where else in the Bible they talk about the beauty of the temple? Ezra, right? When the temple was being rebuilt. I only bring that into it because as you get later and you hear Ezra talk about the temple, Chronicles and Kings give you that beauty of what it was. Chronicles talk about a little bit more. They talk about how the priests will go on the roof and I think it said 120 of them in succession will blow the trumpets. Now, I was watching the History Channel a little earlier, and this had nothing to do with what I was studying, but just so happened, God said, I'm going to give you a little bit of history to go with it. So if you go over to Jerusalem, and as they visit over there, everybody make their pilgrimages over there, there's pieces of brick that have fallen from the top when they, conquest stuff that's still on there. And it says something like, this is where the show part was, the show part or the horn was blown. But it fell from the top of the building. So can you imagine? They would have all of these priests on the wall blowing their trumpets, the sound, the beginning of the day, the end of the day, whatever was going on, they would have priests do that. Now y'all see how all the duties are starting to play into what people were doing? They weren't just there to have a job. The glory wasn't just the temple. The glory was the work that everyone got to see the temple do. Remember, this was Israel's kind of first thing. We had the tabernacle, but we are now set in place and we have the temple. So all that is done. And now Solomon had came to, and it came to be, when this is 9-1, of Kings. I just want to let y'all know that if you have been, remember when we started, Kings and Chronicles, don't forget to go back and look at Chronicles. I know, it's been a while. We got out of Chronicles, we finished with David's story, we roll right here in the Kings. But if you read a lot of the stories in Kings, it'll end, it says, doesn't this tell you in the book of Annals or the book of Chronicles or the book of Kings? They keep talking about each other back and forth so we can understand what was going on. And it's good to have those two perspectives because this is where we're going to get the history of what was taking place with Israel. You find it sprinkled out through other pieces of history, but you won't, because this is not just our spiritual history, but it's the physical history of Israel. We see the things take place. All right. So it's time to finish the building in the house of the Lord. And the king and all all of Solomon's desires because Solomon did what he desires, and that was to build a house. And the Lord said to him, well, we sure we had 9:1? Because I could have swore we did it. Yeah, I could have swore we read the prayer. You should have stopped your throne. Because then it says right after 9:6, if you at all turn back, and I went down to pick up where we were, you or your sons from following me and do not guard. This is because the Lord had told them, because you did this, if y'all stay righteous, I will cover you. I heard your prayer. I heard everything that you asked for, and I have you covered. I will forgive those, the strangers, the foreigners, the people of the city, if they turn to me. I will forgive them. I will always be there for them. But then here comes the stern warning. And the stern warning is for this. If you turn against me, then I will bring all of the troubles on your head. And I'm summarizing because this is what the Lord says. If you at all turn back, you or your sons. Now that's a long list. God isn't just saying if you do it, Solomon. He's saying if you or your sons. Now, why is that a standout? Something that will be pulled, and you say, wow, well, why would he punish the sons? They haven't got that. This is establishing this covenant that he's putting with Solomon. Now, as I read the scriptures, people say, well, it's only a handful of. No, God continuously makes covenants with everybody he's dealing with, because that person will be the head who he's dealing with, and that person will make sure that the lands go the way they're supposed to. We see that? We see how a king over the lands, over the people, should be guiding the people. Therefore, their sons should not go astray. But God made it clear that if you or your sons stop from following me and do not guard my commands, my laws, which I have set before you, but shall go and serve other gods. Or in this case, he said mighty ones, but other gods, and bow yourselves to them. That was the preface. If they go and do all of these things that you see that is surrounding the surrounding neighbors, and the reason why I'm telling you about surrounding neighbors is because it's going to mention them later. If they go after them and serve other gods, I'm going to destroy them. I'm going to take this temple that they have built that is so beautiful, the best temple in the whole wide world, this beacon of light, and I'm going to destroy it. It's going to become a shame and a hiss to the people of Israel. When they walk by, they're going to say, look at what God did to his temple, to the people, because they turned away from God. All right. And it says, then I shall cut off Israel from the face of the soil, which I have given them, and send them away from my presence. This house, which I have set apart or made holy for my name. And Israel shall be a proverb, a mockery amongst the people. Just what I just said. If they get out of line, it's not going to be just crushing. The spirit of Israel will be mocked. You get what I'm saying? You understand what God is saying? He's not just saying that the rubble in the building will fall. He said that the nations around you will look at you and will consider you a proverb, saying, look at what Israel did. Now, here's the key. They went away from their God. Now, it's very funny that the other people around them will acknowledge that Israel had a God that was taking care of them, that was providing for them, and now they see that Israel, who had all this provision, turned away from that. That's the proverb, saying you had it in your hand. You had it, the thing that the rest of the world seeked, and you turned around and you gave it away. The proverb is, don't be that person. If you have a loving God that's taking care of you, don't turn away, because this is what God is telling you. Follow me. Don't go to other gods. And those who see all the provision, because remember, this is a lot of gold coming there, made silver worthless. We see that this nation is growing. We see that they're past. And the reason why I'm saying that we see all of this as they would see it in history. People who saw Israel move as nomads had evidence of what God did. Remember last week we talked about Rahab, right? She was not there, but she heard what was done. So Israel, what's happening to them is not just being heard in Israel. It's being heard around the world. You have a nomadic nation that is moving. They're not making war, but when they do, but war is put in front of them, instant victory. The battlefields are just cleared. Soldiers just run screaming. Walls come down. we see that Israel has been taken care of since they came out of Egypt. Now, the reason why I reference Egypt a lot, because people say, well, what about he took care of this person before Israel was a whole? Remember what he said, Israel, I plucked you from amongst the nations. I made you who you were. You were my first fruit, my son. So this is what we see when he's talking about Israel. You're the one I chose. So he's telling his son, like, don't turn from me. Don't go in a different direction. Stay here where you're safe. This is what I hear. Stay here where you're safe. Because if you go out of my pure view of safety, not only will you no longer be safe, but you will be utterly destroyed.
There. He looks at them as a wife, and as a husband would be not only good to his wife, he was to Israel, but it was obvious to the people. You know, God just didn't do it, but he made it obvious to the people how good he was to them, how he blessed them. And that's why he will instantly say, why did God do this? You know, because
Now stick with that. Stick with that. They blessed
you,
them.
not God. Go ahead.
Right. Stick with that. Keep that in mind that they saw how blessed they was. Because when we get to 10, we're actually going to see exactly what Ken is saying. That the blessing that Israel was experiencing wasn't like, oh, you know, I found this new shirt in a bargain bin and it was $10. No, it was, I walked into the store and the owner came up to me and said, you are now the owner of the entire store. It was an evident blessing that to everyone else, they would say, this is shocking. How did that happen? Which would in tune, the reply would be from the Israelite, I serve Yahweh Elohim of hosts. They would have said it. They would have said, this is where his temple is. This is where I'll go and make the offerings. They would have said these things to anyone who would have asked the question of their blessings. They would have automatically just said, it's from the Lord. It is from above. So when we see that this decree that God is telling Solomon, it's a very, very, very cautionary thing that God already knows. It's just, he's telling Solomon. Solomon knows the direction that things are going. I'm not going to say that Solomon knew what he was going to do, because in the end, we follow the story as it goes. But we know, having the complete book, that even what God was saying right then and there, it was almost a prequel or a precursor to what was coming. What you got?
Thing I just want to say, and that speaks to us too, Brother Walker, that we know as his children that everything that comes into our space comes from God, right? And then for the onlookers, when people ask us, well, it seems like you all have this and you have that, and what's going on? We should be able to put God on display, just like the nation of Israel, and say, hey, all I can tell you is I serve a risen Savior. You know what I'm saying? I think we can use, instead of the temporal things that we have that come into our space as husband, as wife, as children, as cars, as clothes, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
When people ask and notice that, instead of saying, man, I opened 2 businesses, which may be true, but as children of the Most High God, we know that He gave us the ability to have the businesses, so we can put Him on display just like that. That's all I'm saying.
And I mean, that's what Solomon was doing. Anyone who came to see the temple from afar, you remember, it's classes. All right, a king go see a king. Someone might go see an official, so forth and so on. It's classes. So nobody would just walk up and automatically have an audience with the king. You see what I'm saying? But what does happen is those that come and hear the wonder of the world, who are, let's say, in rulership and authority, meaning they have come to see what this whole thing is about. When they came thinking of their rulership and authority, Solomon would say, you and I have that same rulership, but the authority is neither of ours. They will be wowed. You see how the rest of the world is now learning about who is truly involved and who is truly in control of things. So we understand that. But I also want you to look at this too. What the Lord is saying to them is, when you say a blessing and a curse, we hear the prayers. We heard how he will bless Israel, how he said, I will take care of afar, I will forgive sins from where it is. But this right here is also a blessing. Because even though the people still being accosted due to their falseness, the people who saw them and said that they still belong to God. You get what I'm saying here? So even though the destruction is going to come, because we have read and know, even though the destruction is going to come, God still deals with his people. Those are his people. So anyone who's talking from the outside saying, look at the destruction of the temple, look at what has come to the house, look at what he's done to his people. Get what I'm saying here? So even in the chastising of Israel, which is bad, I'm not saying it's good, but even in the chastising of Israel, we still see God takes care of his people. See? All right, so let's continue. All right, 8. And the house which has been exalted, everyone who passes shall be astonished and hiss and say, why has the Lord done this to this land and to this house? Then they shall say, because they have forsaken the Lord their God, who brought out their fathers of the land of Egypt. Remember, he keeps going back to Egypt. Keeps going back to Egypt because Egypt is where he first dealt with Israel, right? Israel went into Egypt where they were at peace, right? When I say dealt with, bringing them out. When they came, because remember, they went into Egypt peacefully. There was no quarrel. It was famine in the land. They had Joseph brought them into the land, but they left Egypt in what we call an exodus, which means a mass exiting, meaning these people had to get out of there. We know how it went. We know the plagues. We know the story. So God is remembering. This is when a time when you were at your weakest point and you called on me, not just the nation. I mean, not just an individual, but the whole of Egypt, the whole of Israel cried out.
God is not remembering. God is reminding them, right? Because of many generations that have gone before them, to keep this understanding where they came from. That's what he's doing.
Now you know the beauty of this and having today's time and us being able to look at the Bible freely. Who in here doesn't know the story of Exodus?
No, and they came out of Exodus says this will be remembered through all generations. Egypt is mentioned all through the Bible.
Yes.
You will see it in Romans, all the other books.
So I take I'm not again, this is not to take away from the scripture. Let's take it out. Who in here don't remember the story of Exodus? I mean, I ain't saying you gotta remember to perfection. You remember the plagues. You remember we who have been put the spirit of belief on, guess what we don't forget? What he did in Egypt. We remember the plagues, remember the pharaohs. We got movies and movies on it. We won't forget the Exodus because the Exodus was the bringing out. It was the thing that he said, this nation is mine. It was the reason why Solomon can say, Lord, when we pray wherever we are and we look to this house, ask for forgiveness because those were his people. He took them out. We seen when he took them out and he was ready to destroy them again because they was out there having a good old time in the desert. Moses dropped to his knees. He said, dear Lord, don't destroy them. These are your people. Why we do that? And God is always saying these are my people, even when they're wrong. Still belong to him because everybody else on.
But because he punishes his people.
He punished his people. We read that in Proverbs 3:12, right? Talks about the chastising of the Lord. All right. Then I should say, we already heard that. Took them out of Egypt. And I took hold of other gods and bowed themselves to them, meaning they left and he brought them out. Now they're going to bow themselves to other gods and serve them. This is why the Lord has brought all this evil on them. And it came to be at the end of 20 years. That's when remember I told you in the Chronicles when it came to be at the end of 20 years. It came to be at the end of 20 years that Solomon had built 2 houses, the house of the Lord and the house of the king. So if anyone asks you, you ever at a trivia night, and they say, how long did it take Solomon to build the temple? Well, you can say 7 years. You say, but that was one room. You can know it. That was one room. You say, but it took him 20 years to build both houses to completion, meaning prayed for, sacrificed in. Everything that was supposed to be done for that house was done and the desires of Solomon. Now Solomon has done all this. The Lord has spoken to Solomon we know what happens to Israel if they get out of line and go follow other gods, whether it be them or their sons. So now, let's get started. That felt like the start, right? Felt like the start. You know, the funny thing about Kings is the Kings and the Chronicles, it feels like you're always starting another story. Because Solomon has done making his prayers, and now we're getting ready to roll into Solomon as the businessman, the tradesman, the one that people come from around the world to see, which is the temple. But Solomon is the one who represents it as the physical being they can talk to. Makes sense, right? There it is. Because if you got a temple, you need somebody to commune, somebody that's working inside the temple. And we know that Solomon just didn't. Anybody read ahead? All right. You ready? I only got two. Dang, man. So we know that Solomon himself, a king, just like his father, he did what at the temple? No? All right, well, let's get into it then, since we. All right, so Solomon right here now we see Hiram, the king of Tyre, had supplied Solomon with. Now this is kind of like a bag. Remember how I was telling you sometimes the Bible kind of flip things backwards so you'll understand them going forward. So this is talking about some of them deals, a recap, some of them wheel and deals that was happening. All right, Hiram, the king of Tyre, had supplied Solomon with cedar, cypress, gold, and much as he desired. Then the king Solomon gave Hiram 20 cities in the land of Galilee. Now let's talk about this. This was a trade, right? We need that. Here's 20 cities inside of where we live at. Galilee is in their land. Here you go. Now this is where Solomon, you know, some people will read it and say, all right, I don't base opinions. I just look at what's happening in front of me. Those 20 cities that Solomon gave, I'm kind of skipping a little ahead. We're going to get into it. Those 20 cities that Solomon gave him, that man looked at them cities and said, man, what is this? He said this ain't. He said this is cabal, right? You know what that word means? Nothing. He said, basically, I don't give you everything in my country. You're going to give me nothing. But these 20 cities, right? Who came out of Galilee? Oh, man. So them 20 cities that been nothing back then was still getting the same type of representation as it was then. It's crazy how much time has passed, but Galilee is still the city that everybody's calling nothing. Because what did Nathaniel say to there it is. Border territory. You can have walls and stuff, man. You can have all over around. And this is the thing. Not only did Solomon give him them cities, Solomon took the time to build up the cities that he had. That was already there, all the stuff that he needed to build up. All right. Cities and Solomon gave him, but they were not right in his eyes, and he said, these are cabal, and that's what they are to this day. Boom, we got that. And then Hiram, though, still being the one and understanding that the love that he had for David, the accomplishment he didn't take that as a slight from Solomon. We're not taking it. He continued on what he was supposed to do, the thing that he honored. And Hiram sent to Solomon 120 talents of gold. Now, we know how much a talent of gold is, right? Andy, how much a talent of gold weigh?
Forget it.
You forget it. All right.
70 pounds.
70, huh?
79.
So he sent him a lot. If you look through here, it's going to be a lot of talent going through here that Solomon is investing. Huh? Hey, and that's about what? $400-something million in modern day? Because it's actual gold we're talking about. So it's a lot. Because I think the 5 talents only equaled up to $2.2 million modern time. So the talent that he's giving him now is equivalent to saying, I'll open up my treasury and I give you everything in it. So this is awesome. I said, this is a recap. All right. And this is the purpose of compulsory labor, which Solomon, raised to build the house of the Lord and his own house in Milo, in the walls of Jerusalem, Hasdor, Megiddo, and Gezer. All right, now, Solomon took the money, built up the cities, did what he needed to. Remember, Jerusalem is not just the place where everybody's going to be to see the temple. It's also a place where everybody lives. You don't want to have the temple sitting in the middle of a city that's trash. So Solomon is building up. Solomon is putting everything into the city. Solomon is still working hard. Remember, this is retro. So we know that all of this, the compulsory labor, Solomon paid the people that was working. that came over on the ships with Haram. As they're working, Solomon says, I'm not going to put any of the Israelites into compulsory labor. I'm not going to make them build it. Because remember, we said it was no hands of slaves that built it. It was foreigners that built up this temple. So instead, he employs them.
For labor his own people.
Yep, he could. But however, Solomon did something else. So he couldn't put them on there. But let's not skip too far ahead, because we got some. He's dealing with Pharaoh. Now this is another go back. Pharaoh, in the process, remember we told y'all earlier in the thing, Solomon married Pharaoh's daughter, right? Well, Pharaoh being who Pharaoh is, and he remember, hey, these guys came up out of Egypt a long time ago, and we haven't forgot. This is an alliance thing. I want you to understand that when we look at the scriptures, we see the spiritual things that's being done for us. But I want you to also look at this is where history is. It was an alliance. If you look at what Egypt and Israel is doing, it's an alliance. It's an alliance because Pharaoh paid a dowry. With my daughter going into here is land that I've taken, which was their land in the beginning anyway. Remember? Pharaoh was just doing something they should have been did in the beginning. Huh?
That they would marry the daughters of other kings to shore up security when time the war and stuff.
Watching out for the borders. But here's the thing. This is where we start to see the dangerous game of what's being done here. We know historically the Pharaoh's alliance is kind of like, hey, why do you got Egypt? Like, why do you need Egypt to shore up anything when you have God? But Solomon is now working. If you notice, after the prayer, we start to see all of the things that kind of make us ask those questions. Isn't that a law to say don't do that? Why, you get where I'm going here? We're going to start questioning the kings of Israel, which if we remember those prayers before, how they sounded so far-fetched that they would do something like that because they were building such a beautiful temple. Everything was going great. It is no reason for this to implode. But if you look at what's happening on the surface, you start to see those little scratches. So you start to see the humanness where you always seen it, but you're really starting to see it now in their decision making. All right. So Pharaoh took the land and gave it to Solomon. So when Solomon married the Pharaoh's daughter, and Solomon built up Gezer in the lower half of Beth Haran, and Baalath, Tamar in the wilderness, and the lands of Judah. So he's building up everything. Now remember, when he's building up the lands of Judah, because what tribe is Solomon from? Judah. Specifically point out Judah, but a lot comes from Judah. So don't just remember, Jerusalem is building, but so is Judah. Y'all get where I'm going here? Anybody? What did it say? For the $4,000 Jeopardy question, why is Judah being built up? But why is it being built up right now? Why is Judah being mentioned? And we're talking about Israel. Every comment should be, this is how Israel got built. City, 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 Israel. But Judah sticks out like a thumb, right? All them other names in Judah. And you would first say, well, because of his tribe. What if I told you because we know the whole story, Judah had to get built up. It couldn't stay a weak tribe amongst the other tribes. So Judah had to get built up. Right? Because we already got one tribe that's already been through turmoil, right? Anybody remember having to Benjamin so long ago in the days of Judges? That tribe is already, it's recuperating, but it's still smaller. They some fighters though, don't get me wrong. But Benjamin has already took a hit. That was the last kingship in Benjamin. Judah is not making that same mistake. Remember, these are still tribes. These are still people. These are still family members expanding their lands within their borders, building up where they can. All right. I got you. I'm at 19. And all the storage cities that Solomon had for the cities of his chariots and cities for his cavalry, Solomon is building a army, cavalry, chariots, things to get around. Yes, some, but you're gonna start to see as he has them beaten gold into shields. He is also preparing for what's going on around them. All right. Storage cities, building them up in Jerusalem, Lebanon, and all the land that he's ruled. So Solomon took things on all the people who were left. There were only ones left were the Amorites, the Hittites, the Pezerites, the Hivite, Hivites. Now look, if I showed you this right here, you'll see why I'm struggling. Sometimes, Eric, I've been trying to tell you, man. Like they throw W's in there, man. I'm like, man, that should be a V somewhere, but I'm trying my best. Yeah, I might need to get one of myself. All right. So and the Jebusites. I remember how the Jebusites, right? They still there. Them was the ones who said, if you come up in here, you can't even beat our blind and lame. Now look at them. They one of the ones still around. All right. These were the ones who were not the children of Israel. They are around. So y'all starting to see things, right? You're starting to see that these people are in the land. They haven't been totally wiped out like they were supposed to. So what do you think can possibly happen in the land? Put them to work. Compulsory labor. I can't get you out of here, but what I can do is I can put my foot so far on your throat that you're going to work for us. And you'll be like that until this day. That's what it say, right? They work for them. Right? And it sounds crazy because after he said you're going to work for him, he turns right around and says, but if you go to 22, talked about them doing all the work in the land because they were not completely destroyed. But Solomon did not make slaves of the children of Israel because it was a law saying you do not enslave your own. All right, it's rules all in Deuteronomy that if they do have to go into some type of compulsory labor, that they should be let go of after a certain period of time, right? Anybody remember that time from our teaching? All right, go back and look at it. It's a fun part. Huh? 7 years. That's 7 years you forgive them. And when we talk about the slavery, they could do what? If they said you did me so good in these 7 years, because how was you supposed to treat the servant? Fair. So don't think the Jebusites and the Hittites, Hivites, all the ites. Don't think that all the ites was being mistreated. The tight people, I like that. They were just compulsory labor. They were your workers every day, right? But the children of Israel, they did not get out of work just because they were not in the labor. They had bigger jobs inside of the kingdom. And the children of Israel, because they were men of battle, and his servants and his rulers and his officers and commanders and chariots, he put them over all of those things. These were the chief officials who were over the work of Solomon, 550, who ruled over the people who did the work. So in other words, the Israelites did what they were supposed to. Remember, the roles is being shaped up in how they're supposed to be the head of the branches that come in, right? You can't just let them come in and be the main branch. But he had to teach them. You had to teach the sojourner how to live in your land. You had to teach them things. But again, we have heard a stern warning. If you go to other gods, if you go to worship them, this is the reason why when we look at what certain kings in the past, or ones were supposed to do, total eradication of certain groups of people, so you wouldn't have this, but God knows. Again, we see the story and forward, backwards, up and down. We can sit and pick through it, but we know that this was the way they were supposed to go from the beginning. Right.
His own people doing work.
He would have had his own people doing the work. Not only that, the land would have been what it was supposed to be. It would have just been them. And God would have provided. Now we have, Israel is not the whole it's supposed to be, even though the work that was asked to be done. Remember, the temple is built. The city is built. The walls is built. But Israel is still itself. We're going to see some of the problems come from there. I'm not going to say Israel's the problem, but we see that Israel itself is where we're going to start to see the cracks. Not so much the city. The city is beautiful. If you remember what God is saying, he never said anything about the city. itself is the one that's going to make it fall. Meaning, this temple that I built, somebody's going to come and say, you know what? This temple is not glorious and magnificent. This temple isn't worthy to be praised. That everybody who would go to that temple would have that reaction. We're going to see this. I'm not saying it just because I'm making it up. I'm saying it because, as the text explains it, everybody who goes to that temple has the same result. So we know that it's not the temple that made Israel fall. It was the people. And I say this to say, in the scriptures, it's always the people. God deals with people. Jesus said, buildings and rubble, they'll go away. But what we do as people stays. The heart of who we are. So it's not, he's not talking about the city itself. Yeah, it sounds like he said the city will become the his. The people will talk. They're going to say this about the people. The people of Israel is what is supposed to represent that light. The building is just, when they get there, that's the house. That's where the Lord resides. That's where they can go make their offerings and sacrifice to him. That's where they can commune with him. But the people is the start. Who we are as people. All right. I'm going to finish this out. Here's chief. But the daughter of the Pharaoh came up from the city of David to her house that's built for her. But he built Milo. So he's building up everything. The daughter of Pharaoh, again, is still involved. She's still in there. I don't know to what level of involvement this daughter is, but she sure gets mentioned a lot for somebody they never mentioned by name. You know, we get one name, but the daughter of the Pharaoh, the daughter of Pharaoh. So I share this. I was at my family reunion, right? And my aunt, she has difficulty saying my wife's name, so she would call her Petey's husband. That's Petey's husband. Until eventually my wife said, my name is Jalita, not Petey's husband. And from that point on, she was Jalita. I love taking my wife around my family because eventually they learn that I don't have to say anything because she will. And it's even funnier when she do it because it's the truth. It hits hard. It's very plain and simple in your face. So I just want to know why they keep saying the Pharaoh's daughter. No, they keep saying the Pharaoh's daughter because guess who it points back to? Pharaoh. You get what I'm saying here? This alliance, how it's interweaving into the thing. In fact, as we get after the Queen of Sheba leave, which we probably won't get into, we're going to see the first thing they said is Pharaoh's daughter, the first line. And then they said everybody else. I want you to understand.
Because they keep themselves tied in, because if you notice, the dowry that was given was not given to Solomon.
It was given to
his wife. So that land that now Solomon and Pharaoh's daughter, Pharaoh's still kind of connected to it.
To that land.
To the daughter. So it's in the residue of the Pharaohs.
Now, I was sitting and I was thinking, a verse came today and it was like, they talked about the prophecy. You know, we know that Jesus, when he was born, they was chasing him and he had to go into Egypt, right? Right. So if you look at the philosophy, as it's just me theologically thinking, can't say that this is true. Just walk with me for a little bit. So Jesus had to come out of Egypt. What you think Solomon need to do? Because don't it seem like where he's right now mentally is Egypt? Even though he's right there in the midst of Jerusalem, he's connected. So he has to come out of that because guess what they also say Pharaoh was starting to look like? More like the Pharaoh. Get what I'm saying? So it make me think about stuff when you hear it in the Old Testament and then you hear it in the New Testament. You know what they're talking about. Jesus actually having to come out of physical Egypt. But you see in the Old Testament where Solomon, where his heart was in Egypt. He did his father's job. He did exactly what he was supposed to do. But his heart was always with his woman, the Pharaoh's wife, who was a representation of Egypt right then and there. Just little things how I think sometimes. I wouldn't say to etch them in stone, but all right. In 3 years, Solomon brought ascending offerings. And 3 times a year, Solomon brought offerings. So 3 times a year, Solomon did what he was supposed to do. Y'all, anybody know what those three offerings was?
Feast of Weeks, and Feast of Booths.
There it is. All of the things that are done in remembrance of what God did for them. So Solomon, 3 times a year, he would do what he was supposed to do. He was making his offerings. If you said the end, the worst thing we got to deal with is Solomon got a couple bad deals that he did for some cities, and his wife dad could potentially be a problem. And we just stopped right there. That would be the least of our worries with King Solomon. But we shall continue. All right. And Solomon built a fleet of ships. All right. So after he did everything, he made his offerings. Solomon starts to build ships for trade, and Hiram sent the servants. They worked the seamen, so forth and so on. Now we have Solomon starting to establish what he's already been given in his kingdom: ships, trades, marketplaces, storehouses, building up the rest of his city. Now, all this was going on. We see that Solomon is coming to completion. Like, he's only thing left now is just to rule and do things of like what is called ambassador, be an ambassador for your country. When people come, you shake hands and walk them around. And that is exactly what we're going to roll into the next chapter. Solomon being an ambassador. All right, we can kind of get a little start. Got a good 5 minutes. Y'all got time? All right. All right. I'm gonna end well, not end it. 28. All right. And then they went to Ophir and took 420 talents of gold from there and brought it to King Solomon. So Solomon has more than enough gold. Throughout that whole verse, everybody has been pouring out their storehouse. Solomon completes his prayer. God talks to Solomon. We see some deals getting made, lands getting bought, a good recap. Because now we're going to go into the next thing, a visit. Now, before we get into it, I've heard theories all out. You talk to people, they say the Queen of Sheba was the one that he was talking about in Songs of Solomon. The answer is no, he wasn't. So if anybody ever come to you and says it wasn't, the Queen of Sheba was an actual queen. I believe it's in the Ethiopian region, but you got to think it was more vast. So when she would come, the same way that a lot of the kings came to visit Moses and everyone else when they were working, or the pharaohs, how they would come and bring their long trains. They would come to the other person's country to see it. It was like think of like a G8 summit, or a summit where the politicians would come together. But this was very, 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 very unique because it is a queen visiting. And she came to let you know, like, Solomon, what you got, I got too. She brought her train of people, her camels and everything else. But what she did not expect is what she saw when she got there. If you read on a little bit, and I don't want you to read too far, but we're gonna cover it all. I'm just kind of closing it out right now. If you go to 5, right? She's talking about the food on the table, but I want to get to the end. It says, after Solomon was telling all that, and she heard and seen the offering, the spirit went out of her. Means she was so wowed by it that she fainted. So I want to let you know that we get ready to see that she came, but she saw. And what she said after she saw, she understood what she saw. That makes sense. Probably don't, but eventually it will. She saw the seesaw, went up and down. All right, I'm gonna put a pin in it tonight right there. We'll pick back up next week. Start with the Queen's visit. Any questions?